Hey, Fit Over 50 Life audience, we have a great show for you today with special guest Eric Degatti from New Jersey. He is a performance specialist. He is in his 50s, and he is going to show us how we do not have to have any fear about being an athlete in our 50s and beyond. Tune in, science, practical tips, how you assess yourself, and more.
Okay, welcome everybody. We got a great show for you. We have Eric, let me get your name right, Degatti. Did I say that right, Eric?
Pretty close to Gotti, yes.
Okay, I'm thinking of the other Gotti, but maybe you can correct me on that. I apologize. Hey, we're going to talk about today on this show some really great stuff. I think you're going to get a lot of value on it. We're going to talk about becoming an ageless athlete, which is something I think we're all going to want to hear about. Kelly, why don't you do a formal introduction for Eric so we can dig right into this?
Absolutely. You know, it's tough to give someone like Eric justice in a bio with just a short paragraph or so, but we're going to reveal more as the interview goes on. Eric truly is a world-class performance coach, and he is a movement expert. He's a keynote speaker. He spent decades helping pro athletes and coaches and everyday people and students move better, train smarter, live longer. He's worked with some NFL teams, he's worked with Olympians. We're gonna dig a little into that, see if he could do some name dropping. But Eric has worked with the best, and now he's on a mission to help really bring science-backed performance strategies to everyone, including those of us who are 50 and over and want to stay in the game. Eric, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So you've spent over 20 years working with people, from pro athletes to everyday people, and trying to help us all feel better. What first really got you passionate about helping people optimize their lives?
There's kind of two stories that kind of go in the backstory. One is I had really bad back pain when I was in my early 20s, like when you shouldn't be having back pain. But I'm just stubborn. And so I just slept on the floor for like 3 months. And finally my mother said, you have to go to the doctor. So I go, and I didn't know any better. I went to a general practitioner. I sat in the office for 2.5 hours to go sit on the tissue paper for another hour to have somebody look at me like I would look at if you opened up the hood of my car and I know nothing about cars. And he just said, oh, it could be a slip disc, could be a pinched nerve, could be anything. I said, really? That's the best you have to offer me? So I, frustrated, I went and I just said, I'm just going to go to the gym. And I looked at every machine that said back, and I just did that. And I just by pure luck, it made my back feel better. And so I'm like, this is kind of cool. And so I had always worked out for playing sports and so forth. So I kind of got into it, and I said, if I'm going to invest this much time, and I want to learn a little bit more about it. And that just kind of got my inquisitive mind going, and it just kept going. And then said, all right, there may be an opportunity to do something here, like as a career. And in the back of my mind, I also had another story. My grandmother, who ran a gift shop, had 4 significant knee surgeries, including 2 replacements. She was someone who was vital. She loved to dance. She loved to do all those things, but it was an incredible amount of pain, so much so at the end of her life, she had a morphine pump in her stomach. And it's like her life was completely side-railed by something that if I could have gotten to her when she was in her 40s, like get her some better mobility, get her a little bit stronger. Like she wasn't somebody that crashed on a black diamond ski run or got checked into the boards in the NHL. Like she ran a gift shop. Your knees shouldn't fail you to the point where you need morphine to get through your day. And so it's like, I want to save the next person to not have to have their life derailed like that.
Wow, that's incredible. So moving away from pain for both you and your grandmother were 2 really big motivators.
Yeah, and then obviously not liking sports, the performance side came into play. And then, the convenient thing is a lot of athletes get hurt. And so if you can marry those 2 things together, make them perform better, and then keep them on the field or on the court or the track, that was kind of the sweet spot for me.
That's awesome. And I love through your excellence in pursuing this that you were able to work with Navy SEALs and Olympians. And can you do any name dropping, some of the people you've worked with?
So probably the most significant is I spent 9 years with the New York Giants back when we were actually good and we won 2 Super Bowls. And so I worked with a couple NFL teams, but I worked with them hands-on as a consultant. I was there twice a week for all the time and got to work with all the players. And it was a very cool experience being part of a team and being able to see what high performance looks like at that level with some of the greatest athletes in the world.
What about baseball players? I saw you worked with some baseball players.
Yeah, I've worked with from high school all the way up to the MLB, and I've done testing at the MLB Combine, and so baseball is my own kind of personal passion. I still play to this day, in a 35-year and older hardball league, and try to survive every Sunday and stay youthful. But I'm not going down easy. I'm the guy that's still in bases, laying out for baseballs and legging out triples.
So you think that's because of the conditioning or the hard-headed New Jersey mentality that all three of us?
It's a little bit of both, but the latter certainly helps. But I am not the guy who's got the knee sleeves and pounding Advil and who needs a pinch runner. I just and a lot of that is preparation, and I work towards that to make sure that I want to be able to do this, and not only be able to do it now, but my ultimate goal is I want to be able to play with my kids, which means I got to keep playing for another 10, 15 years until they're age eligible to play with me.
Wow.
So what do you think has changed in when are you still active with athletes, or have you moved on to helping others at this point?
I will still get some referrals, but I kind of pivoted for a few different reasons. One, from a business standpoint, athletes are very transient. Pro athletes don't stay pro very long. And so, from business model, having to constantly refill that tank is tough. And then at the younger side, I was kind of a little bit discouraged where youth sports has been professionalized by adults, and it was very discouraging to try to develop young athletes when they just never got a chance because they were being forced to compete year round, and they really never had a chance to develop. And so I didn't want to kind of be part of that model. And then there was also the realization that, I kept having this client come to me, and they were seeking me out where they were somebody who was over 40, who still wanted to work out, was refusing to go to the rocking chair, but just didn't know what to do. And they were breaking down, and I was an answer for them. And then after seeing enough of these people come to me, I'm like, the universe is trying to tell me something. And then I was just too stubborn to look in the mirror and say, well, dummy, you're one of them. You're the guy that your ideal client is. And so that's where I pivoted. That's where I kind of, started, putting more of my focus on finding people like myself who are looking at a lens of 40 and over a little bit differently than our parents and grandparents did.
So let's talk about and pivot on that. So we have an audience that definitely is all about being fit over 50. We all have battle wounds from years and years of life. I always say that, a life well lived is a life with some slight injuries for the most part here if you don't challenge yourself. What do you take with somebody from, let's say, what do you do with a person who's out of shape? What do you do with a person who's in shape? Is there anything different you could do with somebody like that?
It's the same recipe. It's just where you plot them along the continuum. So regardless, if you came into me tomorrow and you're an MLB All-Star, or if you're a couch potato, who in their 50s, or if you're somewhere in between and an active, someone in your 30s, I'm doing the same intake. I need to know the same things about you. I need to know your past, what's your medical history, injury history, training history, what you've been successful with, what has not worked. Then I need to know where you're at currently. And I can't make assumptions on that. So I don't guess, I test. And that's why I want to look at what are your movement competencies? How well do you move? I want to look at if you have performance goals, okay, well, where are we starting from, and getting some baseline performance testing that's within the framework of what you're capable of and what your goals are. And then I got to get a bigger picture of the other 23 hours of your day, which is just as important, if not more impactful, because I always give the conversation I always have, Mark, is about seeds and soil, right? I explain our training is just planting seeds, hopefully for a harvest down the road. It would be great if we did a set of bicep curls and we had these beautiful arms that, we put the weights down. It doesn't work that way, right? You're putting in an investment for hopefully that'll pay off later. Well, with that, you need to plant them in soil that's going to be fertile enough for that to grow. Well, that soil is analogous to the what I call the big three. It's your sleep, it's your nutrition, and your stress management. And if those three are in line, I can give you the greatest workout in the world. It's going to be a useless piece of paper if I can't get those other three things to support it.
So what are the biggest mistakes somebody makes, let's say, in their 50s or even 60s at this point when they're working out?
So there's two types. There's one that underestimate themselves and they never push themselves to see their potential. And then the other ones are like, well, I played ball in college. I can just pick back up where I left off. And they overestimate themselves. Now, they're technically the more dangerous ones because they'll be the ones who hurt themselves going into the gym. But that could easily be corrected if you just have good programming. The ones who underestimate themselves don't see it because that's a little bit tougher because there's a mental framework there that they're not allowing themselves a different identity because of where they're at, and that's a little tougher to crack. I can rein in the over rambunctious guy with good programming. The other one I have to try to convince that you're not broken, and that's a tougher sell.
It is definitely a tougher sell. I'm all about, values, beliefs, and identity are the things that dictate our entire life, so to speak. So I agree with you on that one. So, Kelly?
Yeah, so Eric, if someone our age, they're willing to commit to 30 minutes 3 times a week, what would you recommend they be doing?
Okay, so I break things into big kind of pillars, and I say, all right, there's 3 big things. Right, we got to move, right? We have to fuel, and we need to reset. So, and each of these things breaks out into the next 3 big pillars. So, move means you got to move well, meaning that you are not going to get in your own way. You have the freedom of movement that you can do the things you need to do, and we can get a little bit deeper into what that looks like. Then you have to move with some purpose, right? You have to be able to have strength. And so strength training is going to be a cornerstone of that 30 minutes, but it has to represent and support your movement. And so if there's certain things you can't do, if you can't touch your toes, probably deadlifting is not your best option. So we have to make sure that those two marry each other. And then the last thing is you have to be able to move often. You have to have the ability to have some capacity that you can run up a set of stairs, or you can go out and play with your kids, or go do, play a pickup game basketball and not run out of gas 2 minutes in. And so those are kind of the 3, like the trinity of movement. Then that gets supported with the other stuff is kind of the more of the soil, and that we need to, fuel is mostly, most people think of nutrition, which is obviously the biggest part of it. Then there's hydration is another part of it. And then fuel also that people don't consider is what you let your eyes and your ears. It's the books you read, or the social media you watch, the TV you watch, the people you hang around with. All of that is just as much fuel as our nutrition, and that can drag you down just as much as a cookie. And so we need to make sure that that's in line as well. Then reset that's when the magic happens. We got to make sure that your sleep and your ability to recover, and sometimes just be quiet and settle your mind, those all have to be in line as well. So circling back to your question, Kelly, 30 minutes, we got to make sure you move well, getting some good movement. That means taking some time for a proper warm up, which a lot of us skip. Just pulling your arm across your body and riding the bike for 2 minutes doesn't cut it. We need to make sure that we get some key areas moving, which like I said, we can go deeper into. Then you got to get strong, but that doesn't necessarily mean you grab a barbell. I have very few people, that unless it's part of their sport or part of their team programs, that I ever have touch a barbell. And then, strength training is a big part of it. And then to build that fortitude and capacity, that means that we need to have some sort of energy system training, whether it's some intervals that we do, and what we do has to be smart and consider also your movement. That if you don't have good ankle mobility and hip mobility, running may not be your best option, but there are other options. You can, push a sled, you can do battle ropes, you can do a lot of other things if you're creative with it, but we just have to check all those boxes.
So you mentioned something about pushing yourself. When do you know if you're pushing yourself too hard or too little? How does a person know that, or do they really need a coach for that?
The first rule I teach you, day one. Mark, if you're my client, day one, I'm teaching you we need to be 2 things for this to work. Number 1, we need to be challenged. If you're not challenged, you won't change. That's the whole reason this works, is that the most fundamental level, it's you pick up something heavy, your body goes, oh my gosh, if you're going to keep doing that, I'm going to have to get stronger. I'm going to have to add maybe a little bit more muscle. So if there's not enough challenge, you won't change. But you also need to be successful. So what does that mean? That means that if I'm asking you to do 10 repetitions of this given drill or exercise, you should be able to get 10 perfect repetitions. And when you're done, maybe you could have done 1 or 2 more, but that's about it. If you can't even get to 10 with perfect form, well, then you have too much challenge, but you're super, if you can't even get to 10, you have too much challenge and you're not very successful with it. If you can do 20, well, then you're super successful. You just don't have enough challenge. And so finding that sweet spot is a little bit of trial and error, but you should know that when you're done, that like I could have maybe done that for another couple seconds or another rep or two, but that's about it.
So as far as being over 50, is it possible? Is it possible at all to build muscle over 50?
1,000%. Absolutely. There's people in their 90s they've shown in research that can build muscle.
Yeah.
Now, when people think build muscle, are you going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger? Probably not, but most people aren't, especially even when they're younger, unless you're taking some chemical helpers. So with that, yes, you can absolutely build muscle, and even in as almost as important as muscle and strength is power. There's been some very cool research that they call it the powerful but fat conundrum, where people, even if they were slightly overweight, if they can produce power. Now, the difference is this for the people listening. Strength is I'm going to move an object from point A to point B, but there's not a time component. Power is there's a speed component to it and the rate at which you can do that. And that's almost as important, if not more important. And unfortunately, it's the one thing most of us don't train, either because we don't know or we're afraid of it. And two, we lose it at twice the rate we lose strength as we get older.
So where would one of those fall into what we call progressive overload? Would any of those be a progressive overload? And do you suggest that? Every time I do a progressive overload and I go too heavy, I end up just tweaking something. So, then I have to spend a little bit of time nursing that in place. So what's your thoughts on that?
All right, so I got an answer for you here, Mark. So this is that there's more than one way to progress an exercise. So most people think, all right, how are you going to make an exercise harder, Kelly? What's most people going to do?
Increase the weight.
Right? So I call it the RST principle, right? Is that resistance is one way. You want to make it harder? Add more weight. You want to make it easier? Add less weight. Now you can also do, if you're doing body weight, you can change your body position. But sometimes adding more weight may not get you closer to what your goal is, right? And so there are other ways to create more or less challenge. The second one is stability. Right. So if you take that same exercise, and so let's say you're doing even something as simple as a bicep curl, but now you do that in a split stance, or if you do it in a kneeling position or a half kneeling position, you've created a greater stability demand. And now that may actually have more carryover to you going out and playing tennis, or you going out and doing something, more functional out in real life. And so that may actually have a better carryover for you than just adding more weight. The third component kind of ties back to what I said before, is tempo. That's how fast you move it. And so you can increase the speed at which you move it to try to, create a greater rate of force production and power and speed. Or you could slow it down if you want to create more strain, maybe to build more muscle, or even slow it down to the point where you just hold it and do isometrics. And there's been some great research showing the power of just doing isometric holds being a great way to build strength, especially in tendons and connective tissue. So being able to play those three things and not just having weight as your only tool is really helpful in being able to challenge yourself a whole lot more without having those breakdowns.
So you mentioned about isometrics, and I think one of the biggest mistakes I see people so many doing is not having a full range of motion. Like, for example, when they do biceps, they don't come down and get the oxygen really into that. What's your kind of take on people just kind of going? The form is probably more important than the weight itself. I would, at least that's my belief. What's your thoughts on that?
To a certain extent, and it's relative to your goal. If I'm training a power lifter, that may change the rules a little bit. But for general fitness, yes, I want you working through full pain. I'll give you a disclaimer: pain-free ranges of motion that you can own and control. And so that's a big component, and that's why when I start people out, that isometrics are a great way to do that. So I created for when I coach and mentor other trainers, I wanted to come up with a system to kind of rein them in. Like, how do we not allow coaches and trainers to make dumb decisions with their training? And I said, I had this revelation, like, what if we had a belt system like the martial arts, right? The martial arts, what saves me from walking into a dojo and just, starting off day one sparring with a black belt, is the black belt's going to kick my butt. Not to mention the black belt's getting nothing out of that. So what if I took that and applied it to exercise and said, okay, we'll create different tiers of belts to say, well, let's say a perfect example is a chin up, and you want to go and be able to do a chin up. Well, there's some steps you need to earn to be able to do that. So before I even think about having you do a chin up, can you do a straight arm hang, meaning palms facing away from you, full grip, it's shoulder width, and can you hang from a bar for at least 60 seconds? If you can't do that, well, guess what you're going to do? You're just going to hang from the bar. It's just an isometric, and you're going to build some great shoulder integrity, get it to connect with your core. And once you can pass that hurdle, well, now can you do a bent arm hang? Well, you just flip your hands towards you, get to the top of there where your chest is at the bar, and now you got to be able to hold that for 30 seconds. Now you've shown me proficiency at the bottom end and the top end of the two ends for a full range of motion. Now I just got to connect the dots. Now I'm going to have you start to gradually progress in chin-ups. As opposed to what most people do is jump up, grab the bar, wiggle, and have this awful form getting from A to B if they can even get there, and they get frustrated when they don't improve. So if you have these steps, it kind of keeps you in line, and it also makes sure you can even get into the positions and shapes and postures that you need to at either end of an exercise.
Kelly?
Yeah, so I love at the beginning, Eric, when you mentioned the other 23 hours. People like to put their fitness in a box. Like, I can give you 30 minutes or 45 or even an hour, but it is the other 23 hours. So at our age, what are some of the things? Because I know from the moment I wake up in the morning until the moment I go to bed, you know, my body, my life, my lifestyle, if I want to be well and fit and energized, those 23 other hours really make a difference. So speaking to our audience who is hungry to optimize their life at 50 and beyond, what are some of the other things beyond that, 30 or 60 minutes in the gym that are really crucial for living a fit over 50 life?
Yeah, so like I said, Kelly, it comes down to the big three: sleep, nutrition, and stress management. Now, out of that, there's certain ways you can look at where is the leak in the bucket to see, what do you need to focus on more or less of. And I have kind of assessments that do that, but let's just say it's equal across the board. So with sleep, it doesn't mean you need to go out and buy a sleep tracking ring or anything like that, because for some people it actually may be the worst thing that they do. But I want to make sure that you're mindful of more of your sleep habits than anything else, right? And a lot of this just comes down to habits. And the first thing I teach people is that we need to create some what we call non-negotiable habits, meaning that if you're going to be this person in this identity, there's certain steps that kind of go with that. That means that during my normal schedule, I'm going to go to bed at these times. I'm going to wake up at these times. I'm going to have this routine. My electronics are off, or I'm going to do this prior to going to bed, whether it's a breathing routine or a meditation or a mobility routine that's going to help me be more restful. And then when I wake up, this is just part of my morning routine. Now, it doesn't have to be some biohacker 1 hour routine. It has to just be, this is kind of what my day looks like. In terms of the nutrition, there needs to be certain markers that say, look, no matter what else happens, I'm going to make sure I get enough water throughout the day. I'm going to make sure that I get enough protein throughout the day. Then everything else will kind of work around that. And then when it comes to stress management, it's your ability to kind of manage your states and understand that, kind of the Stoic philosophy of what are the things you control, what are the things that you can't control, and then how can you manage your states best to try to optimize those other 23 hours. If you can get those big general things, then we can get into some more details, but usually that's the biggest thing, is getting them into that routine of not just kind of working reactively. Reactively is, oh, I didn't eat anything today, let me pull to the side of the road and grab some food. Your choices aren't going to be really good at that point.
That's so true. Very, very good points in there. So I know one of your specialties is injury prevention and pain. Can you speak to the person who is, our age and has that throbbing back pain? It's keeping them from enjoying their lives. Mark?
L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, back surgery, torn meniscus on both knees, arthritis. Come on, man. Fix me up, Eric.
All right. All right. You don't scare me, Mark. I've seen worse than that. So here's the
jump rope too, by the way. So, but what are you going to do?
Okay. So here's the thing is first understanding that you are not your diagnosis, and that I could see 5 different people with the exact same diagnosis who present 5 different ways. It's a very tricky thing in how we do that. And when people come in and they say, well, I have this disc herniation, I say, well, that disc herniation could be from a high school football game. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily your problem. And so what we want to do is we want to try to look for root causes, and we want to try to look for opportunities where we can make you better. So here's one of the big mistakes that my field made when they started to cross over, where a lot of people like myself were kind of working hand in hand with physical therapists, or I, a lot of times, am the person that people come to when I've been to the PT, I've been to chiropractor and acupuncture, and nothing has worked, and I'm kind of the last resort. Is a lot of people, what they started to make the mistake of was putting you into bubble wrap and saying, oh, well, you have this, let's just create this gentle fitness type of experience. And it was, okay, as much as I want to find out what you can't do, and I want to remove the negative, I also need to find out what it is that you can do. So if I train those things really hard, it's kind of like this concept in Chinese medicine where they call it surrounding the dragon. So if you can only, move your arm from overhead down a couple degrees, and you can move from your side up a couple degrees, and then you have this painful range in the middle. If I train that top range and that bottom range, eventually that range in the middle gets smaller and smaller until it goes away. So I may find out that with your meniscus that lunging is a problem for you. Well, guess what? Don't lunge, and we'll find alternatives for that and other ways to strengthen you until we can teach you to lunge, and then find out, okay, your back prognosis doesn't necessarily tell me anything about what you can or can't do from a movement standpoint. So let's look. Can you touch your toes? Can you extend back? Can you rotate right to left? Can you side bend? Can you reach behind yourself with both hands? Whatever thing you can't do, well, then that's the thing that we're not going to go and challenge. We're going to give you some stuff to try to address that, and let's challenge all the rest. That's the problem we have with a lot of rehab settings, is that you go in and you're going to get rubbed, heated, iced, stimmed, whatever it may be, for the part that hurts, and we disregard all the rest. And so maybe you fortify the one thing that's hurt while the rest of the organism is getting weaker and breaking down. And so it's this never-ending process, this cycle that you almost never get out of if you don't strengthen the organism. And so the art is, how do I make you as strong and as fit as possible without making everything else worse? And over time, those things that bugged you don't bug you anymore.
So I think we're really talking about what is becoming a serious, I don't want to say an epidemic, but it's certainly on everybody's, on my awareness, is the amount of inflammation that people are experiencing today. I mean, you're talking about dementia is a byproduct of inflammation in the brain from blood sugar. Is it the food system? Is it lifestyle? Is it a combination of everything? For me personally, I think you hit the nail on the head. The only thing, and Kelly's seen me struggle through some pretty bad couple of months here in the last couple of months, where I'll be wiped out for 2 days because of inflammation and pain. The only thing that resets it for me is literally 24 hours of sleep. So sleep is probably the thing that I've struggled with the most. I don't know if anybody else who's watching or listening to this struggles with it, but it is basically, seems like it's a thing that can cure a lot of stuff that's taken place. I'm curious to what your thoughts are on inflammation, and also the thing they call infla-aging, I think, for the most part.
Inflammaging, yeah. Yeah, so with that, the biggest thing that you'll see is a difference in terms of if I, had somebody who's at 30 versus 40 versus 50, is the recoverability. And realize that inflammation in and of itself is not a thing. It's part of it. It's a natural process. And so when we train, we create inflammation. Mm-hmm. And so that's a great thing, provided it's not too much. It's kind of like this Goldilocks, is that if it's not enough to stimulate change. It's not enough challenge. And if it's too much, then it creates this breakdown. So finding that sweet spot, and that's where you have to kind of look at all your dials. And what I mean by that is race car drivers going around, the track, and they have all these dials to kind of tell them when it's time to go and get a pit stop. Well, we're not really in tune with that as humans. We're, I joke, we're just kind of like carcasses with a floating head that just don't connect to any of this. And so we don't even, have the awareness to think about sleep or the quality of sleep. And, and so, yeah, the stats show a lot of people have some sleep issues. And sometimes that's surrounded, like I said, around habits. And sometimes they're not seeing the connections. That's where like a wearable device is very powerful, because they can see, I've had clients that never really realized until they got a whoop strap or an Oura ring or something like that, wow, if I have that glass of wine at 9 o'clock versus 6 o'clock, it completely changes my sleep. If I have something to eat a little too close to bed, completely changes my sleep. I kind of stumbled on this discovery because I've been kind of the guinea pig for everything that I've done with my clients, is that I found with a lot of wearables that when I would do a mobility routine, that I would actually have more restful sleep. Is that because maybe I'm not tossing and turning as much and I don't wake up as easily? Not sure, but I started experimenting with my clients, and sure enough, get them to do some deep breathing and mobility work before they go to bed, and they're not only falling asleep faster, but they're getting more restful sleep. And so you're setting yourself up for the ultimate reset, which is sleep. So inflammation is not bad in itself. It's when it's coming at you from all angles, whether you're getting it from your nutrition, you're getting it from poor training, you're getting it from stress, and then you're not letting it exit because you're not taking on either any active recovery strategies and you're poor sleeping. Well, then yes, it all kind of compounds and piles up.
I'm smiling, Eric, because I remember when I first started training clients, I was 17, and they would say to me, "You'll see, when you get old, you won't be able to eat before you go to bed, and you won't be able to eat tomatoes, and all these things." That I was like, wow, and here we are, and now you're right. If I eat late, I cannot sleep at night. That is definitely a thing, and the stretching matters, and I walk every night after dinner, and all those things matter, and your body is your own sort of guinea pig, and you get to experiment. And so we need to be wise and go, okay, that wine at night is not really helping me, but find the things that are. Is stretching helping you? Because it just makes a lot of sense. Eric, before you mentioned power, and of all the things at this stage in our life, if we think about doing box jumps and these kettlebell snatches, it probably is the thing we're maybe the least motivated to do. The last year and a half, I was at F45, and I did 500 straight workouts, and then I had tennis elbow, so I quit, and I went back to the regular gym and lifting weights. And now the thought of going back to power moves, I'm like, it's not something I probably really do on my own. I might do it in a class, but it's important. I just did the Manitou Incline a few days ago, which was 2,678 steps, and I did it in 45 minutes, and I trained for life. I didn't train for that. But I know the power is important, so what would you say to someone, our age and older about how do we begin to incorporate power moves?
Okay, so first thing is just the rate at which you move something. So you have to be good at moving, all right? If you add speed or resistance to bad movement, it's just going to get worse. But if you can move well, right, then what we're going to do is the easiest way to gradually introduce it is work your tempos. So instead of where most people will go in, and let's say, okay, I'll use a bench press. Instead of just going, I'm going to come down 1,001, 1,002, 1,003, pause for a second, and then 1,001, 1,000, 1,002, 1,003 up. What I want you to do is control that down, pause for a second, and then I want you to put that thing up as fast as you possibly can while you're maintaining perfect form. Can you do that? And so come down slow, pause for a second, up as fast as you can. And with the clients I see in person, the few people I do still see in person, I actually have a device called a velocity-based training device where we attach that to the bar, or we can even attach it to a waist belt, and it'll give us feedback. It has an app that'll give us feedback to show you how fast you're moving. And so now you can actually challenge yourself to see that. So that's the easy, low-hanging fruit. So even if it doesn't move fast, but the interesting thing, if you think about moving it fast, it still has the same result. You're recruiting a different motor units in terms of your nervous system. You're recruiting a different fiber types in terms of your muscle. You're actually recruiting more fiber. So talk about building muscle. It's a great way to build muscle at a quicker rate. Then the next entry point is medicine balls, okay? And the best things, get big, soft medicine balls, and they don't have to be heavy. The idea is speed, and so 6-8 pound medicine balls, and just doing simple slams into the ground, starting in kneeling postures, is the best way to do it. Just in a nice tall kneeling posture or half kneeling posture, and just take that thing as high as you can reach it and slam it into the ground. Now here's what you get. You don't need a fancy velocity-based training device. The louder that sounds when it hits the ground, and the more it bounces back up, the more power you've produced. And nothing makes me crazier when I see people in a boot camp class, and they're taking the medicine balls, and essentially they're just falling out of their hands. Like, there's no oomph, there's no intent in there. Like, I want you to put that thing through the floor. And then people, like, it's fun, it's engaging, it's stress management. Like, put that thing through the floor, make noise. And so That's another great way to do it. You could do the same thing with battle ropes. Take battle ropes instead of just going to try to feel the burn and get tired. Take them and make like you're riding the biggest horse you can imagine. You're gonna rip those ropes up and then rip them back down, and you're gonna make a big ripple and wave in the ropes. How high can you make that wave? Like make it as high as you can and slam those ropes into the ground. All that's just speed of rate of force production and speed, and that's great ways to start to introduce power. That's one side of it. The other thing is that we do not train, and that's where all our injuries occur. And this is even with athletes, is we need to learn how to absorb force, how to decelerate. Okay, so whether it's an athlete who plants and rolls their ankle, or plants and pulls their hamstring, or it's the person playing pickleball who rolls and buckles their knee because they don't have the ability to decelerate, or someone who's even older, our ability to get our foot down in time so we don't fall and we can absorb force is incredibly important. That's rate of force production. There's simple things you could do. Basically balance in an athletic stance on one foot, and can you jump from your right to your left and reestablish that balance, and how long does that take? From the time your foot hits the ground to the time you can kind of rebalance, that's kind of our metric. The shorter we can make that time, the more efficient you are in deceleration. Just learning to decelerate is probably one of the best things you can do in terms of injury prevention.
Motivated me.
Go ahead, Kelly.
I'm going to say I picked it back up because, as Eric said before, speed is one of the things that we can do to change the, just the overload on us. And I've been going slower. In fact, you probably remember back to the days of the super slow training. So slower stuff, but you've motivated me. I'm gonna start picking up the pace a bit, and I know it makes a difference. I can feel it in my energy. Mark, you had a question?
Yeah. Eric, is there a sweet spot, or is it different for everybody? You've mentioned sweet spot a few times in here. What's the number of times, the length? When does hormesis kick in? What's your kind of take on that?
So it's way before most people think, right? Unless you're really training for body composition, like I got to get beach fit, right? Which it's like 2% of the people, right? Other than that, right? You should walk out of the gym feeling like you could have done more. You should walk out feeling like I still had at least 3-4 more sets in me, especially if you're training for speed and power. You could feel like I could have done that workout again. If you feel like that, you've probably hit the sweet spot, right? Now, that's going to be different for each person. And as your capacity grows, that endpoint will grow. But the more intensely you train, the less you need to train. I mean, my strength workouts are, if they're 30 minutes from beginning to end, are a lot. But when I'm going, I'm going. And I have jumps and I have medicine ball slams and I'm moving explosively. And so I don't need all that much, because when I'm done, I'm not shot. If I'm doing an arm workout, yeah, you can walk out and have your arms tired. Fine. Nobody ever died from an arm workout. But if you're working for full body like capacities, walk out way before you think that you're done.
And the number of times a week would obviously vary, but is there a sweet spot for that?
Minimum is 2. You're not going to get, I've never seen anybody make significant changes in 1. Now, 1 is better than none, but 2 is where you can start to see some changes. 4 is about the max that I've seen, unless you're making them super short. If you're going to do it in like kind of snacks and you're going to do it in 20, 30 minutes, then yeah, you could probably handle more than 4, but somewhere between 2 and 4, and that's usually more dictated by life than it is the science of it.
Yeah. So what is your take on exercise snacks? There seems to be a lot of research on that, and that was part of some of the notes. If it was something that you had brought up, let's touch on that.
Yeah, I think it's the way we need to go. I think our fitness industry has done a terrible job of giving you these recommendations of that you need to go join a special place, and you have to drive your car there and wear a special outfit, and you have to be there for a certain number of time for this to actually count as fitness. And it's insane. And there's research that shows that if you did 3 10-minute walks versus 1 30-minute walk, not only did you have the same result, but you had higher compliance. And it also, what happens is it increases your, what's called your SPA, your spontaneous physical activity, because now it's just more of what you do, as opposed to, like what Kelly said, it's just in this silo that you forget about the other 23 hours. And so it is huge. And it also proves to the point you don't need that much. You don't need that much, because most people are trying to get it all. Now, for some people, unfortunately, look, the reality is, if I'm training a man or woman who's got to get on a 6 a.m. bus to be in the city, work all day, and they get home at 7 o'clock and they can just muster enough an energy to exercise, they have to compact it into one, big bite. But for the people that have the ability to do it, I would much rather have that spread out in smaller doses throughout the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially at our age. I mean, it breaks up our day to have little fitness breaks from sitting, which is the new smoking. We're sitting way too much. Eric, you mentioned assessing and testing, which I love. For those people who maybe do work out at home and they don't have access to a personal trainer or a gym, what are some things that they can do to measure their progress at home to see that they are making benefits or not?
Okay, so let's look at, first from a movement standpoint. You should be able to keep your legs straight and be able to touch your toes. You should be able to get your arms up overhead so where you can kind of cover your ears, and then you should be able to reach back and kind of extend to where, if I drew a line from your ear to your ankle, you can kind of get some extension back.
Wait, what is that? What do I got to do here?
Okay. Your arms up overhead so you're covering your ears. Now, if I asked you, if you're standing, to reach back with behind you, like almost a little mini back bend.
Okay,
obviously if you're standing.
Yeah.
Imagine a line. If I was staring at you from the side, from your ear to your ankle, you should be able to get behind that line. So you can create some extension there. And you can do this. You can do this, and you can do it pain-free, more importantly. And then if you take your hands out in front of you and just kind of hold your hands together with your arms locked straight, and you rotate as far as you can to the right and left, you should be able to turn your chest to where it more or less lines up with your hips, about 90 degrees of rotation each way. And then you should be able to reach your hand over your head to touch your shoulder blade. You should be able to reach your hand behind your back to touch your shoulder blade. All right. Can you do those? Those are the kind of the big things that I want to look for. Obviously, I can break it down and look into a little bit more, but those are the big movements. If you can't do those, it's going to restrict your ability to do some certain movements and certain exercises I'm not going to prescribe for you. There's 3 main areas where we lose our mobility. And you can just thank your desk and chair from this. It's your ankles, it's your hips, and it's your trunk and T-spine, your rib cage and T-spine. And so if you're going to look to get mobility in 3 areas, those are the 3, and they'll show up in one of those tests that I just gave you. In terms of some fitness tests, there are certain things that they have different markers for male versus female. That kind of falls into what we talked about with our belt test that we look for you to be able to do, in terms of being able to do a push-up, in terms of being able to hang from a bar for 60 seconds would be a good thing. When you'll do good clean push-up with your legs locked, a straight line from your ears to your ankles, from your chest to the floor, all the way up. Can you do that? And then how many can you do? There's even correlations with how many push-ups you could do and your longevity. Another correlation is the reason why the hanging is so important, because there's huge correlations with grip strength and longevity, and so that's why that's important. And so being able to squat down, be able to get down to the floor and back up, incredibly important. Can you do that, and how do you do that without assistance? Is another movement factor, but it's also in terms of functionality. Can you do that? Can you balance on one leg for at least 10 seconds minimum, and ideally 20 or 30 seconds. Those are kind of all the movement categories. Fitness categories, that gets a little bit trickier. You could look into things like VO2 max, which also they can predict longevity based on that. You can even predict when someone can no longer live independently based on your VO2 max. Now, that you don't have to go to an exercise science lab and wear a mask and all that stuff. There's actually some tests that you can do that will give you an approximation of your VO2 max. And with that, I actually have a program you can get for free on my website that gives you some of those tests that you can do to learn a little bit more about that. And then some other tests to look at your height to waist ratio, right? Your height should be at least double your waist size in terms of body composition is probably one of the strongest numbers that they found. And then in terms of where you're at, and go ahead. I'm sorry.
Your height to your waist size should be
yes. Yes.
Okay, so I have to process that. Okay, got that. All right, that makes sense. So obviously,
yes.
Your waist is more than your BMI, which I think is what's your thoughts on BMI, by the way? Because
It's an outdated metric that doesn't really work that well. That's why the height to waist ratio is gold.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So many people I run into say, hey, I'm obese or this or that. I'm like, don't go by BMI at this point. Okay, so
no, and even body fat. I've moved away. I have body fat calipers, and have access to things where you can get body fat, and I don't even use that much unless I'm working with an athlete. I just tell people get an old fashioned cloth tape measure and measure your waist, measure depending male or female. You're gonna males. I'll measure waist, chest, arm, and thigh. Females, I'll measure waist, arm, thigh, and hips, and just use those as your best gauge for your improvement, because the scale is not going to tell you that. And so that's some of your body composition measures. And then I'll give you one more test, because we talked about kind of the big three and talking about, sleep is a little tougher unless you have some metrics other than just doing a journal. Nutrition is your health, and your blood markers are going to kind of tell that story, as well as your body composition. In terms of stress, that's a little bit trickier. Okay, stress impacts our autonomic nervous system. All right, this fight or flight or rest and recover, and ideally we want to be able to kind of balance more towards that parasympathetic side, the rest and recover, versus the sympathetic. Well, if you're over stressed, you're going to be more sympathetically driven. So one quick window into that is looking at your breathing and do a breath hold test. So if you just sit up tall, hands on your lap, take 3 natural breaths, and at the end of your third exhale, pinch and hold your nose and just run a timer and see how long you can hold your breath. Now, you should be able to hold it for at least 20 seconds. If you can't, that tells me your RPMs are running a little hot, right? That you are someone who's a little stressed, because what's causing us to want to breathe is a stress response. So the more calm state you're in, the longer you will be able to hold that. So when I have somebody come in, and I've had people hold it for 7 seconds, 8 seconds, that's someone who's super, super stressed. And so exercise the stress. I got to be really careful what I do with this person. And it's not a static measure. You want to look at it from one day to the next, and you can see changes in kind of what your readiness is for that day. And it's amazing what you'll see impact it. Sleep will impact it. I had one client, I always tell a story, very mild-mannered guy, always has a breath hold of 40 seconds plus. One day I see him at the window before his session, and he's very animated on the phone. And he comes in, he's like, my effing partner, and he got in a fight on the phone with his partner. He does breath hold, it's like 15 seconds. Just because he was revving so high. So it's a little window into where your stress levels are and how you're managing that. So take that whole battery, and that kind of gives me an idea to find out where your sweet spot is. Where do I need to even start? Where's the leak in your bucket? And we start there.
Body doesn't lie. Those are great tests, and I hope that our listeners do go and do these. I'm going to go and do them because I'm curious to see how I'm doing. Eric, what is one fitness myth, especially in our 50s, that you just wish were not a thing?
There's a bunch of them. I think probably the biggest thing, and this was reinforced last week with a story I just told on a post I just had, is I went to my dentist, and there was a new hygienist there who I never met, and she asked what I did. When I told her, I always kind of say it begrudgingly because I never know what's going to come out next. And she reinforced that fear, Kelly, and that she said, "Oh, I worked with a trainer once. I couldn't walk for 2 weeks after we did legs." And my first thought is, okay, this woman is like, this wasn't like someone who's a competitive bodybuilder, or this wasn't somebody who's like a CrossFit competitor. This is like this sweet, like maybe very casual exerciser. Why is she doing a bodybuilding leg workout, right? So the fact that unfortunately, and being a former bodybuilder myself, I get it. And thank God for Arnold Schwarzenegger making fitness become part of our lexicon. But because of that, a lot of what we do in fitness today is biased based on bodybuilding. And so look, bodybuilding is a very, very unique niche sport, right? And very few people come to me and they say, I need to go stand on stage in my underwear in front of a panel of judges who are going to make sure I'm perfect, right? That's essentially what the sport is. And so unless I tell everybody, unless you're going to go stand on stage in your underwear, the panel of judges making sure you're perfect, we don't need to train like that. And so that training does work. It's very effective if you want that end result. But realize that there's a couple prices that you pay with that. One is because you need so much volume of training, it's incredibly taxing, and you can expect to be sore all the time. When I competed in bodybuilding, I was never not sore. It just changed throughout the week where I was sore. And then two is that you need a lot of time. When I was in my 20s and competed, I could do it. But if I plan a 4-day workout split for you and something comes up where you got to drive your kids somewhere, Mark, or you have a business meeting or something like that, and you don't get day 4, well, guess what? You have now body parts that don't get seen for 2 weeks that are going to get overlooked. And so because of that, and because it used to kind of be a badge of courage to walk around with your legs sore when you were 20, it ain't cool when you're 45. And I got to take my kids to soccer practice, and I got to get on a flight, and I got to walk through the airport. Like, it's not cool anymore to be sore all the time. And so I never, unless someone has a very specific physique goal, never program anything but full body workouts. You should know you did something the next day, but you should never be that sore where it's going to impact your function.
It's interesting you say that, because a lot of my workouts have progressed towards what I call full body workouts, which is what you have suggested, and or you suggest to your clients. And one, just for time purposes, I don't want to be at the damn gym all day long. Number two, I just find, I'm more productive by getting stuff done between an hour and an hour less, and I'd rather do it that way. So we were talking about sore. Let's shift and let's talk about the process of recovery. I think that's a big topic we could speak on here. What works? I mean, you got plunges, you got saunas, you got peptides. So we could go down a lot of rabbit holes at this point. But I'm curious to what you're utilizing now with clients that's working for recovery, because that's a big one.
Yeah, work big, work your way in. What do I mean by that? So I use the analogy. There's a great story about a college professor who talked about the jar of life, right? He takes out a jar, puts it on his desk, and he fills it up with these big rocks. And he says, is the jar full? And class says, yeah, it looks full. And then he takes some pebbles out and fills in the space between the big rocks and says, is it now full? And they said, well, yeah, I guess it's full. And then he takes sand and he fills in the space and it fills in there. And his analogy was that's how we should approach life. And the big rocks are your family, the people close to you is the people you love, and your pebbles is your profession and so forth. And then the sand is kind of the little things. And because then what you do is you empty out the jar and put all the sand in first. And when you do that, you have no room for the other stuff. And that's how it's kind of a great, kind of way to look at life, that if you get caught up in the minutia, you'll miss out on the big stuff. Well, the same goes for training, in that I got to look at the big rocks. How are you sleeping? What does your nutrition look like? Okay, and how are you managing your stress? Those are the big three before we ever worry about plunges or saunas or any of those things. If those things are relatively in order, then what we're going to do is, in terms of recovery, understand that your recovery starts before your sweat dries. And the first thing that most people skip out on, that I highly encourage, is a good 2 to 5 minute cool down at the end of your workout. That jump starts that recovery. It starts to put you, because you just went into this sympathetic overdrive of training, of stress, creating inflammation. Great, that's what we want to have. But now let's start to down. I don't want you huffing and puffing, swinging your keys on the finger, walking out the door. I'm going to maybe put you in some sort of yoga pose, or do some sort of mobility drill, or just have you even lay on your back and just do some deep breathing, focusing on super long exhales for 2 to 5 minutes, and have you just completely walk out at a lower heart rate than you walked in at. That jump starts the recovery process. Now from there, depending on what your goals are, I'm not going to have you cold plunge anywhere too close to when you worked out, because it will act, because what does it do? It cuts back inflammation. Well, that's not good if part of the inflammation process is part of what builds muscle. And so I kind of have to let that run its course. I don't want to interrupt it with an ice bath. So, and then also I don't want to have an ice bath right before, or anywhere close to bedtime, because the ice bath is stimulating. It's a sympathetic thing. So if you're going to do it first thing in the morning, make sure it's a couple hours away from any type of strength training you do, and it can certainly have some value, especially if you're involved in any kind of activity or sport. Afterwards, it can dull the sensation of some of the post, competition soreness. Heat is phenomenal. The research on sauna just keeps getting better. If you have access to one, use it as best you can. Research shows probably about an hour total per week is great. However you break that up is fantastic. Nutritionally, protein is number one by far, without even a close second. Making sure you're getting enough protein in throughout the day, and for most people, that's gonna be somewhere close to a gram per pound of body weight, or somewhere in that neighborhood. If you tell people that, they're probably going to fall a little short. But if I set that as a marker, they're just going to naturally boost up their protein more. And then from there, it's hydration, and all the other stuff will support that, but it won't replace that.
Now, when you talk about protein, what about if somebody's looking to lose weight? Because I work with a lot of weight loss clients, and I guess I'm looking for validation maybe, but I'm big on the simplicity of 1 gram of protein per healthy pound of body weight you're looking to be. So if you're 200, you want to be 150, shoot for 150. It's most of the time, like you said, they're going to fall short, but it's an easy goal to remember. You still feel the same way about protein as long as they're looking to lose weight, or would that be too much?
I would almost say more. You almost can't overeat protein. Right? No one's ever come, Kelly, in all your years, anybody ever come to you and say, oh, I got it. I'm a mess. I ate too much chicken. Right? So it never happens. And so with that is protein is satiating, meaning it helps fill you up. Protein has a higher thermic effect of eating, meaning a certain amount of calories just get burned off in the digestive process. Has the highest thermic effect of eating of all the macronutrients. And then they've shown people where in research, they said, look, you can eat whatever you want, but you have to hit this protein number. And those people all still lost weight just because of those effects. And so if you can just get people eating enough protein, a lot of the other stuff falls into place.
Well said. Well said. I 100% agree with you on that. Excellent.
So Eric, recently you launched the Ageless Athlete Blueprint for men over the age of 40 who want to do all the things we're talking about. They want to perform well, not be in pain, recover faster. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's been kind of a labor of love since, I had this concept for it. So I wanted to be able to expand. Part of it was during COVID, saying, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to train a person in person again, and how do we figure out a solution for that? But then realizing, okay, well this opens up doors to where I have people that want to work with me, but they just physically can't get to where I am and don't have that bandwidth. So how can I deliver this? And so I really sat down and said, I want to deliver the same experience that you would have if you were one of my clients that's been training with me for 20 years. And so the first part of that was building an app that could deliver that. And the second part was not just having it be, here's exercises. Yes, there's exercises with all the videos explaining here's what you do and here's how you do it and here's your reps and sets and how to track it and all that stuff. Here's how you're tracking your nutrition. That's great. The other part of it is if I'm training you, Mark, well, I'm probably spending as much, if not more time educating you than I am actually counting reps or doing any of the other stuff. And so I want to be able to teach you all the things we've been talking about now. And so what I did is I have my little notebook that I kept next to me while I was training people for almost 2 years. And I write down, what are all the things that I keep saying and teaching people? And then what I did is I shot over 100 short video lessons that are anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes on recovery, on hot and cold, on cardiovascular conditioning and all these things. And I have all those lessons available to you that are kind of spoon-fed to you throughout the process, so you're getting this education. So I want to have it to the point where kind of the proverb, I want to not just feed you a fish, I want to teach you how to fish and teach you how to take care of yourself. And so that's what the process is. And all along the way, how do I also deliver the assessment piece to make sure it's dialed in for you? And so that's where I created that belt system to say, okay, here's a test. See if you can do and tell me where you fall on this test. Here's a movement test. If you can't do these movements, not only here's the exercises that you're going to do alternates for, but here's a program. If you can't touch your toes, well, there's a program built in there for if you can't touch your toes, do this every day until you can't touch your toes. And so I wanted to make it as comprehensive of an experience as possible, so it replicated what I had been successful doing in person for 25 years.
That's pretty awesome.
That's
pretty
impressive.
Awesome. So,
yeah, that's impressive.
Kelly, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to, unless you have another question, I was going to ask people how they could find out more about Eric and all the things he does and where to get this Ageless Athlete Blueprint, because it sounds amazing. from the men.
So the easiest way is you just go to my website and it's my name. It's Eric, ERIC, Dagati, Dagati, and then on there you'll have all the information. And in there you'll find out about Eterno Athletics, which is the arm of my hands-on coaching or my virtual coaching you're talking about. And then I also have a couple things. We talked about power. I have an ageless power program that's on there you can get for free, where it kind of gives you a step-by-step over the course of anywhere from I recommend 6 to 12 weeks, how you can start to integrate certain power movements into your workouts gradually over time, and give you the reps and sets and the exercise and so forth. And then there's also, I mentioned VO2 Max. There's a little mini course on VO2 Max and how you can test it yourself, and some metrics and some methods you can do to try to improve that. And then from there, if it's something that you think you need a little more help with, well, that's where you can just book a free strategy session with me and kind of figure out where you're at, where you need to be, and if I can be the person to help you get there.
Those strategy sessions, people don't realize how valuable they are. You get through one limiting belief, you have that aha moment, and something that you could have been struggling with for the next 10 years, you could literally just break through that. Those things are so powerful. So
this was a strategy session for me, Eric. It was. I am going to go.
Yeah, you got us pumped up, man. I'm ready to go back to the gym, Eric.
I've been going through the motions. I'm going to test and see where I'm at, make sure I'm improving, add more power, and definitely be sharing this message. Eric, is there anything we didn't ask you that you'd like to share with our audience?
No, just I would say, going back to what Mark said, and the most important thing that, as coaches and trainers that on the other side where I teach coaches and trainers is that, in empowering people and in this demographic is reminding them you're not broken, right? You're not broken. There's lots of things that you're capable of and can do, and so I truly believe that there's a lot of powerful things that you can do. This is our generation is the first real generation to kind of test those waters. I look back at pictures of our parents, our grandparents, they didn't think of doing any of this stuff. They just assumed after 50, well, you're on the back nine and let it slide. And gardening was the extent of it. So we're the first generation that's refusing to take that. But we don't know quite what to do with that. That's okay. There's people like myself that can help you with that. But first you need to accept that identity is not who you need to be, right? That you are not broken is number one. And number two is that there's a lot of things that comes out of you feeling powerful in terms of how that's going to, on the first side, I'm almost telling you your mind is going to drive your body. And on the flip side, it goes the other way too. The more powerful I fear, what it takes away is what a lot of people that I wish if I could take away one thing from our generation and above is fear. Is that you shouldn't be scared to go up and down stairs. You shouldn't be scared to get down on the ground and get back up. You shouldn't be scared that, I can't do, how many guys I talk to be like, hey, you want to come play baseball with me? No, I can't do that. I'd blow out my shoulder. I'd do whatever. And I'm like, I have zero fear of that. I have none. I'm stealing second base the second you lift your leg. I have no fear. I'm sliding to second base. Yeah, I donated some skin to the infield this weekend, but I have no fear that I'm not gonna get up from this, and I can't wait to do it again. And that's a very empowering thing to lose that fear. And so the two sides, you're not broken, and please don't keep going through life scared. It's a really lousy way to go through life.
Kelly spoke very highly of you, and one of the things I noticed in just talking to you is not everybody gets, a lot of people know the mechanics of moving people, but the mindset, which I believe is probably 100%, you definitely 100, this is not stroking your ego, this is the truth. You get the mindset behind moving people, and it's a pleasure to see and align with somebody like yourself, man. So, appreciate you participating in this thing today, and hopefully you can help some of our old folks trying to be young here at Fit Over 50 Life. So for sure.
We all get old. We don't have to be old.
That's right. That's great. Good hashtag. I love that. Eric, very inspiring. Just encourage our audience with your not only the science base, but the practical and just really incredible information that's useful. Everyone go to his website, ericdagati.com. Check out the program. He's got a lot of great free resources there. And definitely the men should check out the Ageless Athlete Blueprint and take advantage of those resources. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everybody, for your two biggest commodities, your time and your attention. We appreciate it. We'll see you on the next episode.